My wife and I feel like the most wonderful gift that God has given us is our children. We want them to have the same kind of happiness that we had in being raised as a Christian, knowing of Jesus Christ. But there seems to be a sinister movement at our foot in this country, a tremendous movement to bring every man, woman, and child into the occult. It's just behind the scenes of the media, and yet it's there in everything around us. In entertainment, we see it in television and in the movies and on the radio. It's in the elementary school systems, the public school systems, colleges. We see it in the business world and advertisement. It's almost impossible to live in this world without being influenced by it. So we've taken our children out of school and we're educating them at home. And we don't have a television in our home. We try to avoid those things on the radio and music forms that would bring our children in contact with the occult world. If parents only realize the tremendous movement that is underfoot today and the effect that it's having on the minds of adults and children, they would be far more protective and more careful.
We have kids being killed. We have people missing in America. We have our own MIs right here. We have cattle being killed. We have all types of perversion going on, and it's affecting America.
The children were given knives and told to go and stab those bodies. They described a satanic goat's head being on the wall over the table. They described a lot of candles. And they described people in black and white robes with hoods.
We were taught to aid in the kidnapping of children. What they would do is the kids would go and play with the children and then tell them that they were either going to go to a party or that there was some toys or whatever and get them so they weren't on the move, and then her father and other members would grab the kids.
Do you find missing children sometimes fall prey to these people?
I believe that they do. We can't prove that they do. But as a law enforcement officer, I question 2 million children missing in the United States, knowing that many of those are not runaways and are so young that they couldn't run away anyway.
One of the primary aims is to destroy the belief system within a child, to make a child turn against what they believe in terms of who they are, of who God is, and to desecrate all manner of flesh, all manner of church institution, all manner of sign and symbol that a child could in any way be attached to.
The hearts were cut out, and the children were made to chew pieces of these children's hearts, pieces of their flesh.
Is cannibalism part of the ritual?
The children have spoken about this in almost every instance. Also, human feces, or drinking the urine, or drinking human blood.
That's part of the ritual.
Right.
These people cover their tracks very well. When they dispose of a body, they use that body as well. They will use, as I said, they will cremate that body. They will use the ashes that will become part of what they will continue to present.
In 1972, Johnny Todd claimed to have been saved from a life of witchcraft. His conversion story became a sensation. Todd claimed that a witchcraft conspiracy was taking over the world. But the book The Todd Phenomenon, 1979, revealed inconsistencies in Todd's story. Thus, many threw out his warnings altogether. But leaving all fantasy aside, let's see how much truth there is to this conspiracy of Lucifer worship. We discover who Lucifer is in the Bible. Beginning in Revelation chapter 12, verse 7, we read that Michael, or Jesus Christ, and his angels fought against the dragon and his followers. The dragon and his followers did not prevail, but they lost their place in heaven. And in verse 9, it describes that they were cast down to this earth. Some being of tremendous power and force was cast down to this earth. And he wasn't alone. For we read in verse 4 that his tail drew 1/3 of the stars of heaven. Now the stars in the Bible are considered to be angels, or the messengers of God. 1/3 of God's angels have come down to this earth, beings of tremendous power. Beings of abilities far beyond our own as human beings are down here in rebellion against God. That first deception is brought out in Genesis chapter 3. Here we read in verse 3 that he tells our first parents that if they disobey God, they will not die. In fact, he makes it clear they will not surely die, but that they would continue to live. This was the first lie, the idea that man is immortal and cannot die. The second lie follows it. The serpent says, "Ye shall become as gods." This teaching of Lucifer that man will become a god, that he will not die, that he will evolve into a higher order of beings until he becomes God himself, is the foundation of the great movement of Lucifer today. Why did Lucifer leave heaven? Why was he forced out? The answer to that is brought out clearly in the book of Isaiah. There, beginning in chapter 14, read about the fall of Lucifer, this mighty being. "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High." The entire reason for his fall from heaven was because he exalted himself. "Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit." Just what it means that this mighty angel will be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit, is made very clear in Ezekiel chapter 28. Here we learn that the God who is behind the religions of Babylon and Tyre was a magnificent being. Beginning in verse 12 we read that "Thou sealest up the sum, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. Thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was thy covering, the sardius, the topaz, the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, the jasper, the sapphire, the emerald, and the carbuncle, and the gold. The workmanship of thy tabrets and of thy pipes was prepared in thee in the day that thou wast created. Thou art the anointing cherub that covereth. And I have set thee so. Thou wast upon the holy mountain of God. Thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created till iniquity was found in thee. By the multitude of thy merchandise they have filled the midst of thee with violence, and thou hast sinned. Therefore I will cast thee as profane out of the mountain of God, and I will destroy thee, O covering cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. Thine heart was lifted up because of thine beauty. Thou hast corrupted thy wisdom by reason of thy brightness. I will cast thee to the ground. I will lay thee before kings, that they may behold thee. Thou hast defiled thy sanctuaries by the multitude of thine iniquities, by the iniquity of thy traffic. Therefore will I bring forth fire from the midst of thee. It shall devour thee, and I will bring thee to ashes upon the earth in the sight of all them that behold thee. The end of this movement and the end of this mighty being is ashes upon the earth. How is it that so many people will be deceived by this movement at the end of time? The answer to that is brought out very clearly in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, beginning in verse 13. It says, "For such are false apostles, or beings that claim to be sent from God, but they're not, they're lying. Deceitful workers, transforming themselves into the apostles of Christ. And it's no marvel, for Satan himself, or Lucifer himself, is transformed into an angel of light or truth. Therefore it is no great thing if his ministers also be transformed as the ministers of righteousness, whose end shall be according to their works." A tremendous deception is taking place in the human family, where Lucifer and his followers are deceiving the human race into believing that he's bringing truth and light to them. But the end will be destruction. Jesus Christ, in prophesying of the events to transpire just before his coming, made it absolutely clear that one of the last signs to take place before his coming was, and I read in Matthew 24, verse 24, "For there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect." He makes it clear that some will claim that Jesus has come in the secret chambers. That's a reference to the seance room, that Jesus would come through the movement of spiritualism. He says, "Believe it not." And then in verse 27 he says, the way it's going to happen is as the lightning comes out of the east and shines to the west, the coming of the Son of Man shall be. We are not to be deceived by the movements of spiritualism at the end of time. Another description of the same event is brought out in the book 2 Thessalonians, chapter 2, beginning in verse 3. There the Apostle Paul describes that Jesus will not come unless a falling away comes in the Christian church first, that some power that he calls a man of sin would set himself up in the temple of God. This is the Greek word nous, and consistently Paul uses the word nous, or temple, to represent the church or the body of Jesus Christ in the Bible. Thus some satanic power that he calls a mystery of iniquity would rise in the Christian church. Following the setting up of this apostasy in the church, he says that when he that will let, that means the power that holds him back, releases him, then shall the wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned who believed not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. This movement will be characterized by tremendous miracles, signs, and wonders that would deceive, if possible, even those who know their Bible. Another tremendous description of Lucifer's movement of deception at the end of the world is brought out in Revelation chapter 13. Here we read in verse 13, that he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do. Real miracles. This grand movement for the destruction and deception of the world is brought out again in chapter 16 in the book of Revelation, where John saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs coming out of the mouth of the dragon, the system of paganism, and out of the mouth of the beast, the system of apostate Catholicism, and out of the mouth of the false prophet, apostate Protestantism, the 3 great powers of the Western world. For they, these spirits like frogs, are the spirits of devils, working miracles, which go forth unto the rulers of the earth and of the entire world, to bind them together to a battle against God Almighty. A great warfare against the true God will be fomented by the movements of spirits, devils, at the end of time. But friends, we're not going to believe they're devils. This movement will seem to be a wonderful thing, a movement that will bind the whole world together in peace and safety. It's going to deceive everyone except only those who are bound to the true God. And there'll only be a few, a very, very few, that remain undeceived. There's volumes of information available today concerning the rise of the occult. This is documented evidence that the scriptural prophecies are true, that a loving God has tried to warn mankind. Then why will so many people be deceived? It's because most people would just like to pretend that nothing of a conspiratorial nature is happening. Most people read very little, and when they do, it's almost never outside the realm of the controlled media or novels or popular history. Many would like to ignore the Bible prophecies completely and believe that the future will be that of peace and prosperity. But to the honest in heart, it's becoming more and more difficult to pretend that everything's okay. The material I'm about to share with you can all be found in current publications. And although the warnings are more horrifying than any fiction, the inroads of spiritualism must clearly be presented to those who are willing to listen. The Luciferian conspiracy begins with the lie that man is immortal. Nothing has caused more heartache than the loss of a loved one, nor any question more stirring than where will I go when I die? As you and I look in the mirror, we see the wrinkles form and the gray hairs. We are dying while we're alive. Death is stalking as a relentless predator. We never know where or when it's going to strike next. It may be a loved one, or even ourselves. If a lying spirit made contact with us from the dead, we'd certainly believe it. wanting to believe that our loved one is alive, or that there is life for ourselves beyond the dead. Life is such a precious thing. The mystery of life has been something that has been sought after by man in every age. Men have done terrible things in their search for life to unlock these mysteries. They've beat and damaged their own bodies. They've listened to the lying teachings of esoteric priests, offering up their own children as human sacrifice. In each country there are gods that represent death and life. Egypt, it's a scarab beetle, Osiris or Serapis. In the Greek culture was a god Zeus, holding the lightning bolt in his hand, a symbol of the life forces, the energies of nature. In India, the symbol of the serpent represented the life forces. Indeed, in almost every country, the symbol of the serpent is a symbol of healing or life. The seven-headed dragon was a symbol of the life forces, the controlling power of nature in every culture of the world. Men even worshiped their genitals, the phallic god, Dionysius, Bacchus, or Osiris, as symbols of the life force. Indeed, all the gods of the mysteries were symbols of this mysterious energy that surrounded and filled all nature. People wore jewelry to give themselves more of these powers. The search for the occult powers has gone on in every age and in every way. There are tremendous pseudosciences that revolve around the electrical energies. John Dee in England did his research first as a medical doctor and then into the world of the occult, talking to the dead, foretelling the future. These practices went underground during the rise of the Roman Catholic Church. It was persecuted much as early primitive Christianity was, and thus the old esoteric cults began to die out, and the research was done in secret, in the mysteries. The state religion of Rome was Mithra, and underneath the old cathedrals of Europe today, we find the pagan temples of Mithra is where the Christians first began to worship. Thus we know that spiritualism, occultism, was absorbed by the Christian church in her effort to evangelize the world. The mystery of the wafer is the mystery of absorbing the life forces. Sunday was the symbol of the sun's power, and the sun representing all these energy fields in nature. The priests carried these divining rods or staffs with them, and when they were buried, they were actually worshipped after death. The confessional and the teachings of the eternal burning hell were all things that were copied from the spiritualistic teachings of the occult world. The use of women in religious services, setting them apart for special purposes, again was a copy of the temple priestesses of the occult world. Little do we know of the suffering of these nuns behind the walls of the cloistered convents. The Inquisition was set up to persecute anyone who disagreed with the church. And so the research into the occult went into the secret world. The real history of spiritualism is the history of the secret societies. In the church, the Templars united their interests with the Ismail of the Ottoman Empire. Here, in their secret rites, in their castles around Europe, they carried on the mysterious rites of the occult. They kissed a statue of a goat-headed god in their initiation. Persecuted by the church, they fled into the British Isles, and there in 1717 set up the first Masonic Lodge. In these lodges, men took death oaths to keep their teachings secret. Although they flaunted biblical symbolism, Christian and Hebrew symbols, such as the Bible and Solomon's temple, as we look closely at these things, we'll find it surrounded by the occult symbolism of Babylon, Egypt, and India, as the Bible is only used as an allegory of the astrology worship of the ancient occult mysteries. Solomon's temple was the soul man or the sun man or the sun god's temple. We know that the cubic stone representing character represented in the mysteries 6 sides and 12 lines, or the system of astrology. If you look on the eastern wall of this Masonic lodge, you'll see a G and a pentagram. The G represents God. The pentagram is a symbol of the ruler of the dark forces, or Satan. The god of Masonry is Lucifer, or Satan. And when these occultists say, "Our Father which art in heaven," they are not referring to the God of either the Hebrews or the ancient or the Christians. They are referring to the god Lucifer. Once a Mason is passed to the ranks of initiation, he becomes a pagan nature worshiper, irrespective of whether he originally was a Christian, a Hebrew, or even a believer in the god Allah, because there is an Islamic branch as well. Part of the Luciferian mysteries is the teaching of evolution, or the transmigration of the souls. No modern scientist developed the teaching of evolution. It was a teaching of the Luciferian mysteries from the time of Babylon. The idea that there are electronic magnetic forces from one mind to the other was also a teaching in the mysteries. It's not anything new today. Adam Weishaupt was a devil worshiper, a Luciferian, and he laid out a plan to take over the entire world. 1776 he published his plan, and in 1789 it got its start in the French Revolution. First workout in the French Revolution. Following him, Mazzini took over, and then the demonic man Albert Pike became the great Grand Master of Masonry. Pike perpetuated the Luciferian revolution. The religion is Manichaean neo-Gnosticism, teaching that the divinity is dual and that Lucifer is the equal of Adonai, the god of the Christians. With Lucifer, the god of light and goodness, struggling for humanity against Adonai, the god of darkness and evil. No matter what rite, the great architect of the universe is not the God worshipped by the Christians. Many of America's presidents have been Masons. In 1921, Colonel Mandel House set up the Council on Foreign Relations, the Luciferian conspiracy in the United States. In 1913, with Wilson, they captured the destiny of America's financial institution. Mussolini was a Satanist, an occult worshiper, and Hitler was a member of the Vril and Thule Society, both Hindu societies whose symbols was the swastika. He and Himmler believed that there was a world beneath the earth called Shambhala with Vril power. They tried to tap into the Vril power and felt if they could find it, they would rule the world. In the SS initiation, they took a vow to Lucifer at midnight. The racist concept, evolutionary teaching of Hitler that destroyed so many millions of people is the same philosophy that's behind the whole New Age Luciferian movement today. Aleister Crowley was one of the leaders of the occult world. His law of man indicates the kind of law that the occultists believe, that man has the right to do whatever he wants to do on the earth, to work as he will, play as he will, rest as he will, die when and where and how he will. That man has the right to eat what he will, to drink what he will, dwell where he will, to move as he will on the face of the earth. That man has the right to think what he will, speak what he will, write, draw, dress as he will. That man has the right to love as he will, to take his fill and will of love. That man has the right to kill anyone who would get in his way. The slave shall serve. Crowley was an example of the selfish immorality of Luciferianism. It was in the middle of the 19th century that the movement of spiritualism became real popular. It started in Hydesville, New York. A couple of little girls called the Fox Sisters heard some rappings in their bedroom. From that time on, in 12 countries simultaneously, spiritualism was born. These young girls became mediums. 100 mediums began in New York that year. It spread everywhere. Everyone was wanting to know something about the occult. Men like Daniel Douglas Holmes, the Flying Scotsman, Eusebius Palladina, and Leonore Piper, mediums that had many things happen around them, became popular objects of psychic scientists who were trying to explain in some way the mysteries of the occult, but without believing the Bible. The Eddy brothers in Vermont established an inn for psychics to come to. There they had a stage, and they would put on psychic performances where spirits would dance and play music and things on stage. Henry Alcott, a lawyer from New York, was very interested in the occult and went to the Eddy Brothers Inn to find out about these things. There he met a Russian seer by the name of Helena Blavatsky. She had also come there to investigate the Eddy Brothers phenomenon. Together, They established the Theosophy Society in 1875. In 1877, she published 2-volume set Isis Unveiled. Working together, they eventually went to India and established the center of the Theosophy Society there. Coming back from India, in London, Madame Blavatsky wrote The Secret Doctrine and published it in 1888. It became the foundation of occult philosophy from that time. Mary Besant took over Blavatsky's place. She worked in India to establish human rights movement there. She claimed that she was directed by the god of the underworld, or Shambhala, the lord of the world. She worked closely with a man named Leadbeater, a homosexual and a former Roman Catholic. Leadbeater, now a spiritualist, entered into research in the area of mind sciences. He noticed the aura of a young man, Krishnamurti, and believed that this would become the Maitreya, or the Christ, but they were terribly disappointed. Catherine Tingley, another theosophist in America, tried to establish a communist program, a utopian society in Point Loma, California. Manly P. Hall, the great Masonic writer, claims that his inspiration came from the Secret Doctrine. Eliphas Levi wrote the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus Christ, the occult explanation of the 18 lost years of Jesus, where they claim that he learned the mysteries of the occult. Alice Bailey established the Arcane School. Now, Alice Bailey merged Christianity and the occult movement, the Luciferian teachings, and formed what we know of as the New Age movement. She was a prolific writer. She believed that these secret Tibetan masters that were communicating with mankind were leading them into a new age of evolution, and that soon this secret hierarchy would become a public hierarchy when every human being was initiated into the Luciferian religion. Her and her husband, Foster Bailey, established the Crotona Institute in Ojai, California. Visitors come there today. There's a press there. Publications are sent all over the world. In their meditation room, I noticed the door to it had not only symbols of astrology, but the V and the O. I know from studying Gnosticism that these were symbols of the cobra, or of the serpent power, symbols of the god Lucifer. In the room, there were crystals. They believed that these attract cosmic energies or forces. A young man was meditating there in front of them, and behind him I was shocked to see a picture of Jesus on the wall, as they worship Jesus, but not the Jesus that you and I know of. On the other wall was the Buddha. They worship Jesus and Buddha together. In Ojai, California, the World University of America teaches occult sciences. I talked to the proprietor. She became angry when I suggested that Lucifer had fallen, violently angry. The symbol in their meditation room was the same as on our dollar bill, that which was designed by Adam Weishaupt, the symbol of world revolution and Luciferian conspiracy. Benjamin Cream, once a worshiper of the saucer intelligences, now has accepted the teachings of these spirit masters of Lucifer worship. He published an announcement in newspapers all over the world stating that the Christ was now here, and believes that very soon Maitreya, the Buddhist Christ, will manifest himself to the world, and believes he's a prophet to bring that message everywhere. Marilyn Ferguson, in her book The Aquarian Conspiracy, is teaching that the world is passing into a whole new age. This is called the Age of Aquarius. They say that the last 2,000 years was a period of Pisces, of Christian supremacy, but that the next 2,000 years is the Age of Aquarius, when the occult will be revived. They believe that we're about to receive a new avatar. An avatar is a teacher, a great world teacher or master to come before mankind and lead him into the next step of evolution. This new teacher, although he's called the Christ, is not the Jesus Christ of the Bible that many people worship today. But this New Age teacher is the spirit of what they call the Christ. The one they claim will inhabit the body of a man and will guide humanity into an age of peace, an age of spiritual enlightenment. This is the fastest growing movement in the world. Thousands have claimed to look for the coming of some sort of Savior. The Jews, a Messiah. The Christians, Jesus Christ. The Buddha, Maitreya. The Luciferians claim that this one that is coming will answer the need and the cry and the prophecies of every religion in the world. A vast movement for the initiation of the entire human race is taking place today. Harry Price established his laboratory for psychical research in London. Since then, psychic research, or ghost busting, has become a universal pastime, made popular by the movie Ghostbusters. Psychic research is taking place all around. It's believed that the unconscious aspect of men's minds has hidden powers, and that through mental exercises, men can somehow harness these powers. Today, through radio, television, movie entertainment, it's becoming evident that people like Matthew Manning, who show psychic powers, or this man here who's thinking into a camera and the impression is on the film, or this photograph of a ghost, is all aspect of what men's mind can do. Ouija boards are now outselling Monopoly games. People are experimenting with hypnotic mind travel called astral projection, believing that in the hidden resources of man's minds are supernatural electrical powers that he can harness that actually create its own alternate realities. That man can go back into the past, or that man can heal. Edgar Cayce made popular the idea of psychic healing, and he was a prominent member of what we call the holistic movement today, which is the natural side, the pseudoscience side of Lucifer worship. Today there are classes and seminars, classes in colleges and universities that are teaching that man's body is an electrical unit that the energies of nature can pass through and bring healing to other people. When you walk into a holistic restaurant, a holistic health food store, this is not a Christian institution, but it's an institution that believes that man can raise this power of the unconscious mind to his higher nature through healthful living and actually gain control of his environment. Many people are unwittingly being brought into the occult through water dowsing. This ancient art of finding water is the use of man's body as an electrical conduit. The use of the pendulum, the wand, all of these things are used in the occult circles. Some people have become completely controlled by the occult because of these sciences. It's now believed that three-dimensional items can attract these electromagnetic forces. The pyramid in Egypt has long been known to be an attractor and condenser of energy. From the ancient esoteric religion passed all the way down to this time, it's believed that its passageways and its tunnels hold prophecies. Bovis discovered these electrical energies in the pyramid. Today, people are believing that these magnetic fields control every aspect of our life, and there's a rebirth in astrology worship, believing that the planets somehow hold a magnetic pull, and depending upon what way they are aligned and where the sun is at the time one's born, your entire destiny, they believe, is determined. I believe that the spirits can do this, can guide a man's destiny by the planets, if he is not controlled by another power. Because of these powers, many of the leading scientists have entered into studies in the area of the psychic science. The world has been prepared for this new occult age by children being taught myths and legends from the time that they're little children as part of literature in high school and college. How can they escape when the subconscious mind is full of the idea of fantasy and magic? Walt Disney has become one of the greatest promoters of the occult. Many parents think it's safe, but it is not. It'll bring their children into spirit worship in time. Here Mickey Mouse is playing the part of a wizard, and you've heard of Darby O'Gill and the Little People and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. All are occult. Cartoon programs on TV today are attracting children into the occult sciences. Demons are entertaining our children today and are dancing across the screen. These are being imbued into the mind of children. Terror is there. One little program called Gremlins, soft little fuzzy things, become demons to the children. Children never forget these things, and they become means of affecting the rest of their life. The most popular game today is Dungeons and Dragons, an occult game of imagery. The occult believes if you can control a man's imagination, you control his whole life. They teach if you can imagine things hard enough, they'll come true. This is a revival of the ancient Northern European witchcraft, the belief in the cosmic powers of the ancient European witchcraft gods. Dungeons and Dragons has a powerful effect upon the mind. When pressed with the secret of Dungeons and Dragons' success, Gygax concedes when you can choose a character you want and acting out all your deepest fantasies of your own heroism, send that character in the most fantastic, unexpected situations in search of valuable treasures. When you can see that character gaining experience and proficiency, then you have gained a direction for your entire future. The manuals of Dungeons and Dragons actually have the spells in it and tell you about the magic that you will have, the different implements of occult art that you will carry out in your imagination. Once these things are imbued into a man's imagination and his imagery takes on a certain personality, there is a spirit that works in that person's life from that time forward. Books have come out now and are explaining that the occult explosion is taking place all around us. Many Americans don't see it, but young people are joining occult groups and cult groups far faster than they're joining Christianity today, and their children have almost no chance for the future. Witchcraft is Lucifer worship is the fastest growing worship in the entire world. Images of the occult and Satanism have been flaunted so long and so hard through music and through television, through radio, that young people in colleges and universities taking classes there in the occult have moved right into it, and it's become a common concept in society today. This newspaper article tells about witches that do a public ancient witchcraft rite that is thousands and thousands of years old and inviting the public to come and see it. People are involving themselves in fire walking today. What is this developing? A whole new age of morality where women want to give up the natural responsibilities of women. The book The Necronomicon, Witchcraft Rites, is now available publicly in any bookstore. Anton LaVey of San Francisco has formed a satanic church in America, and it has its place among the churches of the world today. Many young people are getting into Satanism because of the belief that they can gain powers for themselves, powers that will give them money and wealth. Young people are locked into groups of 13 called covens. There are thousands of these across America. They're brought into it in elementary school and high school, many times by their teachers or their friends in school. Keep your children out of public school. Today, churches are being vandalized by Satan worshipers and witches. Mass murderers are often connected with occult or witchcraft groups. The son of Sam claimed that Sam was the devil and that he had an insatiable thirst for human blood. Part of the Luciferian conspiracy is the humanistic revolution to force the Christian God out of the educational system in America. The NEA, the National Education Association, has worked close with the teachers' union to force humanism into the class. It's destroying the Christian morality, making the children look to themselves for their own morality. Many parents have tried to keep their children at home to educate them because of the atheism that's in the school system. But where the NEA is strong and where the teachers' union is strong, these families are harassed by legal authorities. The Homeschool Legal Defense Association based in Washington said an estimated 35,000 families are threatened with legal action last year. The worst states were North Dakota, Michigan, Idaho, Florida, and Texas. We're in a war against the occult. What Todd warned us about is actually happening. Lucifer worship is taking over the entire American society. The book A Trip into the Supernatural explains that the most important people are part of an elite group of spirit worshipers. One gentleman explained that going to seances and this type of thing was of very little value, that the real source of power is to be found in the worship of demons or the fallen angels. He was the leader of a band, and he explained that when he became a demon worshiper, that money flowed in. Their fees were the highest in the industry. People liked to dance to the music. In reality, the spirits, he said, controlled us, or other words, possessed us, energized us, and in turn we passed the influences on to the people. They liked what they got, and they kept returning for more of the same. The pictures that were in the chapel room there, they said, these are the gods that our folks talk about, the chief council.
They rule over legions of spirits. After they materialized, we photographed them and then we made these paintings of them. At the end of the room was a large altar. And when they looked closely at it, there was a majestic-looking individual in that painting. The priest explained that this was Satan. He chuckled at their surprise and then said it was solemnly important that the next generation believe that the Master and the spirits do not exist, so that they can rule the inhabitants of this planet successfully in the decades just before us. The priest stated that everyone they could make to disqualify themselves from being a member of Christ's kingdom automatically became a member of Satan's kingdom. The satanic priest explained that thousands of years ago, his master had jurisdiction over countless numbers of beings in the universe. He became misunderstood and was forced to flee his domain. The inhabitants of this earth, it says, kindly welcomed him, and he deceived them in order to take over them. When it became known that his rival Christ would come to earth after assuming the nature of a man to attract humanity to himself, the master and his counselors decided to follow a strategy similar of that one that originally enabled them to take this planet. This planned course of action would require all demonic spirits to carefully counsel human beings to live in a way that would disqualify themselves from becoming members of Christ's kingdom. The spirits would encourage people to listen to their feelings instead of the words of Christ and his prophets. In no sure way could the spirits obtain control of the people's lives without the individuals realizing what was happening. Let's look into the Bible and see what the words of Christ and his prophets are that Satan does not want us to know. First, in Genesis chapter 2, we learn that, "And the Lord formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul." So the word breath is synonymous with a living soul and life. Let's look at the early Hebrew use of the word ruach. We find that it means breath, and then it means life and a rational soul. These are the earliest uses of the word and the correct use of the word. Seeing its use in Psalms 104, verse 29, "Thou hidest thy face, they are troubled. Thou takest away their breath or their life, they die and return to their dust. Thou sendest forth thy spirit, and they are created, and thou renewest the face of the earth." So that we understand that with the animals, God gave them life or his breath. The same is true of man in Psalms 146. We're told, "Put not your trust in princes, nor in the Son of Man, in whom there is no help. His breath or his life goes forth. He returns to his earth. In that very day his thoughts perish, or his rational mind disappears." There is no knowledge after death. "The living know that they shall die, but the dead know not anything, neither have they any more reward, for the memory of them are forgotten. Also their love and their hatred and their envy is now perished. Neither have they any more portion forever in anything that is done under the sun." Ecclesiastes 9. Solomon makes it clear that there is no memory after death. He goes on to say in verse 10, "Whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with all thy might, for there is no work, nor device, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in the grave whither thou goest." Life ends there. We look in Nahum 1:10 to see the end of the wicked. It says, "For while they be folded together as the thorns, and while they are drunken as drunkards, they shall be devoured as stubble, fully dry." No eternal burning hell. It makes it clear in verse 9 that affliction shall not rise a second time. Death will be permanent in the final judgment. The last prophet in the Old Testament, Malachi, the last chapter, we read, "For behold, the day cometh that shall burn as an oven, and all the proud, yea, and all that do wickedly, shall be stubble, and the day that cometh shall burn them up, saith the Lord of hosts, that it shall leave them neither root nor branch. But unto you that fear my name shall the Son of Righteousness rise with healing in his wings, and ye shall go forth and grow up as calves of the stall. And ye shall tread down the wicked, for they shall be ashes under the soles of your feet in the day that I do this, saith the Lord of hosts." Another end, utter end, will come to those who do not believe faithfully in the true Jesus Christ, the only name given among men whereby we must be saved. A narrow path leads to life eternal, not the many paths of the occult world. God wants to invite us home. Satan wants to make sure that we never go home, that we perish eternally. I urge you to listen to the voice of Christ and the words of him and his prophets. There are so many things working against us today. One of the most potent, deceptive forces in the world today is that of rock and roll music. Let's look into this subject together. Satan came down from heaven to destroy all who loved God. He determined to use his powers of music. We understand that Lucifer fell from heaven because he wanted to become God himself. The Bible tells us that his pipes and his tabourets were made within him in the day that he was created. Well, this leads us to understand that music will play an important part of his deceptive power. We find that the pagan god Apollo is seen with his lyre here. We find that the Greek Pythagoras said that God was to be thought of in the form of 3 notes of an instrument. Music played an important part in the initiations in the Orpheus cults. Indeed, all the cults of the world use music as initiation into demonic possession, into occultism. A witch doctor, seeing a spirit, would direct the people to paint their faces up or cut their bodies to look like it and to dance like it, in that way gain the power of the spirit, all done to the driving beat. The same was done in preparation for war from Scandinavia to the jungles of Africa. People used the beat to fill their minds with hate. In the Taipusam, the beat is used to gain spirit possession in Singapore. Years later, today, they are now using rock and roll to gain the same spirit possession. Some sort of mind preparation has to go into effect to gain firewalking. That same preparation is necessary in this healing episode with this witch doctor. It is the driving beat. This beat, Pavlov, the Russian scientist, harnessed in order to gain control over the reflexes of animals. In one experiment, Pavlov conditioned a dog to be excited at a fast beat and inhibited at a slow beat. Then when he took and he ran the 2 beats together in a syncopated beat style, the dog's nervous system was destroyed, as its mind did not know how to respond. Lenin said, "You've saved the revolution," and they formed a music form that would destroy the Western world. They tied it into a music form already over here, the African beat. That music form was used in the occult world of Africa and among the slaves, and has been adapted to the gospel music that's in the South today. This music was adapted by the communists to form a folk music, which later was formed into a music called rock and roll. Rock and roll is a word that means sexual intercourse. And young people, once they were brought in contact with this music that had high sexual overtones to its lyrics and an exciting driving beat, while at the same time they were taught in a Protestant ethic not to be involved in premarital sex, caused the collusion effect in their nervous system, caused rebellion and violence. But as dangerous is the high decimal level that the young people listen to this music at. The music is listened to decimal level up to 125, while a decimal level of 90 is the level of pain. The young people just experience the music. It goes right through their bodies. Some of the young people would put eggs, raw eggs, up along the stage in front of the great speakers there, and the high whining music would actually coagulate the fats and the proteins. Well, they didn't realize it, friends. This music was also destroying the delicate tissue of their nerves, their brain. It was affecting the nutritional element of their bloodstream. It was damaging their ears and the delicate cochlea and the cilia, making it harder for them to hear. Those that have been in constant contact with this music as a profession have led lives of debauchery and ruin. Janis Joplin committed suicide. Jimi Hendrix overdosed on drugs and suffocated in his own vomit. Highest paid performer in the area of rock music. In his time, he became a spirit worshiper. He would see ghosts and flying saucers over the stage. We know that Elvis Presley, one of the longest playing recording artists, eventually overdosed on drugs and left his wife. These have become the heroes of a whole generation of young people. Those early recording artists dressed to appeal to the public. The young men reflected that of dream boys or lover boys. There was an all-American look. But in the early 60s, things began to rapidly change. When the Beatles came over to this country, they introduced backmasking and subliminal masking on their recordings. This encouraged the young people to drugs and to violence and to communism and to hatred to parents. The young people didn't realize what was happening to them. They obeyed their new masters who could speak right to their unconscious minds. Timothy Leary promoted LSD, and thousands of young people committed suicide because of this new effort of the drug world and the occult world. Young people were told to get involved in violence, and the new morality was born as syphilis and other diseases of that kind arose with the open sex and love-ins. It eventually led to violence, and even today we have communism and socialism rife on the campuses among the teachers and students. In the early 60s was also a new form of music called punk rock. It started out with gross photography of people being mutilated and tortured, and eventually became a rock form where people dressed up as bisexuals. They glorified pain, destruction, death, and finally, friends, devil worship. As you look at the covers of these records, you see the pain and the bloodshed and the violence that now attracts young people. In order to get a continued turn on, they have to look to death and pain, and everything revolting and everything vulgar is now what attracts our children. What will the next generation be like if this continues to go? Little Richard Penniman, when he came out of the rock and drug world, he was a homosexual. He was a drug addict. And also he was a spirit worshiper. He told the young people he had been possessed while he was on stage and knew that other groups were, and that many of these groups actually had seances where they called spirits into the tapes to go out to bring the young people into the occult. You can see it here, the faces of the Rolling Stones. There's no love in those faces. They want to bring your child or bring you into the occult. Satan wants your soul. On one of their records, their Satanic Majesty's Request, the group was presented as witches and wizards. Mick Jagger claims to have made an agreement with the devil for riches and wealth. Nothing in his entire music career has done anything to elevate young people to a higher way of life. But if you look into his eyes, you can see very clearly that there is no happiness there, and that he has no real interest in your children, but I believe to bring them into the occult world, to make them worshipers of Satan like himself. What's to happen to the young people when these type of people are their heroes? What's to happen to the generations ahead? Another one who claims to be possessed by a spirit is this man here. He claims to be possessed by a 15th century witch whose name is Alice Cooper. In every way, he seems to be a normal human being. But when this man gets on stage, his facial characteristics change. He becomes an entirely different person. The stage man is a spirit-possessed individual. When you look at these record covers of him and how he acts on stage, you get the appearance of a different being entirely, someone that hates. He does revolting things in front of the young people, even making love to a boa constrictor. Rod Stewart claims to be a Druid high priest. The Blue Oyster Cult flaunts their belief in the occult on their record cover. The fire of unknown origin is the fire of the electromagnetic powers of nature that the Druid priests used to call from the earth to burn alive their victims. Jim Steinman, the one who leads the group Meatloaf, does rock stage performances where he does physical exertion under spirit possession that they have to put him in an iron lung for. Or Jimmy Page, who lives in Aleister Crowley's old house, and there he carries on witchcraft and seance rites. One of their songs they played and recorded once had words glorifying the devil. On their record cover, Houses of the Holy, little children are going up to the top of a hill where a little girl is being offered as a human sacrifice. That little girl, the daughter of one of their recording artists, died 2 days after the record cover photograph was taken. A group that was popular a number of years ago among the early teenagers was a group called KISS, or Knights in Satan's Service. One of their records, called Destroyer, showed them destroying the world, and another shows a winged serpent, symbol of Satan, in their performance. These people eventually had to take off their paraphernalia. But before they did, we know that one of their group on stage ate or bit into blood corpuscles and spit blood out of his mouth. Another ate fire, and the kids just loved every single bit of it. The entire system of devil worship is being glorified as young people can take these performances home and view them again and again on videotapes that put this imagery of Satan worship into their minds. This This imagery in their minds can never be forgotten, and the young people are going into witchcraft faster than any other movement. The KISS has had to take its paraphernalia off and gone on stage. But other groups are gaining prominence, such as Twisted Sister, who gained no prominence until they put the demonic occult activity on stage. Judas Priest, another glorifying the devil, and the Motley Crue, a punk rock group, bisexual in nature, that has swept from England across the United States. You can see on their forehead the 5-pointed pentagram of devil worship. Jackson wasn't popular until he made a videotape called Thriller, in which he presented himself as a ghoul, a being from the dead, and as a werewolf. These scenes of terror and satanic activity made this man popular among a group of young people who have no normal emotions left. Now this young man is a superhero, and the entire young world has gone after him. For what? Acting like a demonic spirit. Other groups reflect their occultism by the symbols on their record cover alone. If you even never heard their music, the young people are attracted to these record covers, knowing that here they have a brother that worships the devil as they do. Queen, on one of their record covers, is doing a seance or contact with the dead. Queen means bisexuality or homosexuality. Black Sabbath, one of the most colorful groups of the dark side of religion, had 3 S's symbolizing 666. One of their records glorifies the idea of revolution and the young people fighting against the world that they'll have to live in. On the back of one of their records again, the lyrics of a song. These lyrics, going through the minds again and again, put into the minds of the young people these sentiments. You're searching for your mind, don't know where to start, can't find the key to fit the lock on your heart. You think you know, but you're never quite sure. Your soul is ill, but you will not find a cure. Your world was made for you by someone above, but you choose evil ways instead of love. You made me master of the world where you exist. The soul I took from you was not even missed. Lord of this world, evil possessor, Lord of this world, he's your confessor. Now you think you're innocent, you nothing to fear. You don't know me, you say, but isn't it clear? You turn to me in all your worldly greed and pride. But will you turn to me when it's your turn to die? Who's talking here? It's the devil, friends. He's preaching to the young people through rock music. On one of their records, he blasphemes the 3 angels' message of Revelation 14, showing the angels as gray, smoking cigarettes, and playing cards. On one record, the idea of being born again is symbolized as a child of the devil. The young people are rebellious against Christianity, but this pushes them into the lap of Satan. On one of their record covers, they show a human sacrifice with the numbers 666 underneath the skull. Why would younger people be attracted to this? Something has happened to their emotions, to their mind, and they're changing and drifting further and further away from the only hope that there is for their eternal salvation. 666 is the number of Satan and the Antichrist. Another record cover shows a counterfeit of the Shroud of Turin, that grave cloth of Jesus Christ. It's on display in Rome, is counterfeited here with a cloth in the gutters, dirty, with the face of Satan on it, or the devil. What will they think of next to cast aspersion on the character of that God that created and loved them? One of the group of Black Sabbath that broke away was Ozzy Osbourne. He became popular by biting the head of a bat and catching rabies. Then he made popular this idea of tearing the appendages off of animals and throwing them on stage. Madonna flaunts her sexuality in front of thousands of young people with her sexual lyrics. But as you look at the back of her on this record cover, you see the symbol of the Illuminati, the symbol of the occult conspiracy. The idea of the superiority of the Aryan race, those ancient Teutonic witches of old, those that Hitler thought should be the next age of Earth's evolutionary growth, are flaunted also now on record covers as the idea of Dungeons and Dragons gained popularity. One record cover by Jim Steinman group Meatloaf shows a winged deity, a magnificent being, blonde and blue-eyed, again Northern European witchcraft, but golden wings represent the devil fallen from heaven, and you see that chain in his hand. It represents that he's broken free, that he was once a slave. Now look at the words at the bottom. I know that I'm going to be like this forever. I'm never going to be what I should, and you think I'll be bad for just a little while. As today the occult presents Lucifer as a good god. But it says here, but I know that I will be bad for good. And here he presents himself as a glorious and wonderful being, a being that is broken away from God. He is the new God to the young people today without them even knowing about it. Mick Jagger knows, and other rock stars know, that they control your young people. In one of the movies they did where the cameras were clicking away while they sang Sympathy for the Devil, 2 young people were beaten to death. They control the young people. They know that they do. Through the use of the lights, the driving beat, and lyrics, Satan's spell is complete in rock performances. From Sunset Strip to Czechoslovakia, youth are exhibiting that these powerful tools of communism and the occult to control our minds have done its horrible work. The Word of God says that the wages of sin is death. Thousands, yea, millions are on a gloomy road to eternal death. I beg you, give up these destructive agencies and turn to Jesus. The concept of the gods in spacecraft emerged from the spiritualistic revival of the mid-19th century. John Ballou Newbrough was controlled by spirits in writing a new Bible called Owaspy. It describes the founding of the major world religions by advanced beings coming in spacecraft. Many of the names used in the book sound amazingly similar to those used in the movie Star Wars. It is no accident that from the latter part of the last century, readers of fiction have been bombarded by space novels and comic books. Lucifer has been preparing the world, especially the minds of children, for the masterpiece of his deception in the saucer movement of the 20th century. Sightings, as published in major newspapers at the turn of the century, reflect Lucifer's deceptive principle of keeping the saucer movement just in advance of man's scientific abilities. The spiritualist von Däniken claimed to have seen through astral projection the history and the return of the saucers. Since his books, hundreds have been written presenting the same theme. Today, serious studies have been presented not only in a scholarly fashion of sightings, but also books for children, presenting it in a factual way, giving a history of the landing of the saucers, claiming the biblical sightings were saucers. These things have been made vividly real through a constant bombardment of science fiction movies, all the way back to the early 50s. Today, it's been serials on television. At the same time these are going on, we see sightings described in newspapers of the landing of saucers in remote areas, the damage of crops, and also terrible mutilation of animals after sightings have been seen by ranchers and farmers. Who could not look on the endless variety of saucer photographs taken with home cameras by people of all walks of life and not be deceived by Lucifer's deceptive plan to convince mankind that advanced beings are visiting us from other planets? One of the most startling documented experiences recorded is that of William Meyer of Hinwell, Switzerland, who on January 28, 1975, made first contact with saucer beings claiming to be from Pleiades. By April 4, 1978, he had 105 meetings with these fallen angels posing as spacemen. Bill took hundreds of photographs of the spaceships. These, along with pages of quotations of the spirits, were published in September 1979. Their communications are curiously harmonious with the teachings of modern witchcraft and the New Age movement, to the point of using the exact words and phrases of those claiming to be illuminated by the advanced beings living in the hollow earth, or those claiming to be illuminated by God's self within. In the 60s, many prominent individuals came to the front claiming to be prophets of the flying saucers, such as Uri Geller. As from a child, he showed these supernatural powers, but the most prominent was that of George King, who claimed to be sent by Jesus Christ to charge mountains around this world. This is Mount Shasta in Northern California. This is George King and followers up on that mountain making contact with spirits, claiming to be contacting the beings from outer space. This map of the United States shows in red blocked areas those areas where most of the sightings take place in the United States. When we look over at California, we can clearly see that Shasta has been the center of a large number of sightings. There's something supernatural taking place in that area. In fact, we know that over 40 cults have gathered around that mountain. Some worship what they call the Lemurians. They say live beneath the mountains. But other, like the Findhorn group, stand by the old philosophies of the New Age movement that were envisioned by the theosophical ideas of Alice Bailey. With all this, what appears to be tangible evidence, it's no wonder that thousands and thousands are gathering to worship saucer intelligences and are being taught how, in classes, how to make contact with these beings from outer space by letting their minds go in the same way that ancient Hinduism taught how to make contact with the God within. Many religious people are now believing, and Christians are now believing, that God was originally an astronaut. It's made its way into the sacred realms of the Christian church. Some are interpreting the idea that maybe Adam and maybe Eve, the first man and woman, were originally brought here by flying saucers. The vision of Ezekiel chapter 1, which is a picture of the throne of God, a vision that was given to Ezekiel, is now depicted as a flying saucer by very prominent individuals. In fact, now the entire Bible is seen as contact with supernatural space intelligences. In the early 60s, Barney and Betty Hill saw a flying saucer. It landed and took them aboard. Under hypnotic trance, the story was brought out of this terrifying ordeal. A movie was made after that and comes out every year. Hundreds of these kind of experiences have been brought out by hypnosis, but others, such as Val Johnson's running into a flying saucer, have tangible, factual evidence involved in them that can't be denied. One of the most terrifying aspects of the saucer experiences is that of seeing beings that are terribly distorted and horrifying to look at. While some see these beings as looking like human beings, others see horrifying creatures, the terror of which burns itself into their minds and into their memories. After seeing a being of this nature, it would be almost impossible to tell these people that they really saw nothing, that satanic agencies were manifesting themselves to these individuals in the form of these horrifying creatures. The world is on the verge of seeing beings come out of flying saucers. The movie Encounters of the Third Kind did more than just present this idea. It glorified this idea. It made people want to make contact with space intelligences. It depicted the government as playing a decisive role in making contact with the space intelligences. In 1953, they came in over airspace. This made this an issue of national emergencies. When the jets were sent up, they couldn't even get near them. Since then, the government has established several projects. In Donald Keyhoe's book, Flying Saucers Top Secret, he reveals the government's conclusions on the flying saucer mystery. They found that in the Hydrographic Office of the Navy there is a map called the Perry Reese map that goes back 5,000 years and is so accurate only one thing could explain it: a worldwide aerial survey. Originally came from a Turkish naval officer in 1953 and made its way to the Navy. They believe that the map indicates that Columbus had a map. The original map went back 5,000 years. It must have took a tremendous team of men to have made it. And since there was no factories or laboratories that have been found through the years, and no parts of airplanes, they must have come in spaceships. Since that time, the government has gotten behind many projects to bring this information openly before the public. By fascinating films and documentaries, they have tried to make it appear to be an archaeological finding. But the most prominent movies are those who have come out recently, such as Encounters of the Third Kind. On this magazine it says the UFOs are coming. The UFO depicted in the movie was the size of a city coming down out of the clouds, making trumpet-like sounds, but over a mountain called Devil's Mountain. Could it be Lucifer's subtle announcement of his own counterfeit of the second coming of Jesus Christ described in the Bible? The movie series Star Wars was crafted to place the ancient magic force of witchcraft into a modern guise.
The Force is what gives the Jedi his power. It's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us and penetrates us. It binds the galaxy together.
In one of the many UFO magazines, an article was written by Robert N. Webster describing the surprise of a reporter in observing the presentation of Star Wars to the President and the White House staff and reps from other countries 6 months before it's released to the public. It was a shock because this is not a White House practice, especially on a children's science fiction movie. According to Webster, the film was crafted to warn us of the dangers of interplanetary enemies. Why did the government release this to the public now? Well, they believe that they must prepare us to mobilize our forces without panic to repel an invasion that's coming from the heavens. What was the reason for the tremendous popularity of this movie? Well, the facts can be made known. These facts may shock us. It's successful because a large part of it they believe is true. You see, for 2 centuries, Johannes Kepler and other famed astronomers tried to solve an interplanetary mystery. They believed there must be a planet between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter. But it wasn't until the late Dr. George H. Williamson devoted his entire life to contactees, the whole story, they believe, was brought out. These people came up with the same set of facts, supernaturally. What was that story about? George H. Williamson describes that all these contactees told of a great interplanetary government that existed in this area of the galaxy for a long period of time. This system was a government that eventually turned its police force over to a huge computer system, except for one planet, a planet by the name of Meldic. Another name given in books and periodical for Meldic is Lucifer. That might be interesting to you. The planet was experimenting with atomic energy, and eventually this Earth-like planet Meldic blew itself up. The tragic result of it was the great meteor belt that surrounds our solar system between the planets of Jupiter and Mars today. Just before the planet was blown up, these contactees tell us, beings came from other planets and in mercy transferred a group of these to this Earth in its early stages of physical involvement. These individuals, it is believed by the saucer movement today, were the original Adam and Eve, or the beginning of our intelligent life form here on this Earth, the origin of our entire civilization, and that these beings are coming back to bring peace to this Earth at the end of Earth's history. Why are the non-human characters so exciting and interesting in Star Wars? The facts are that these were drawn from the files of thousands of sightings. This article says that Earth indeed faces a great challenge, participation in an interplanetary war against the evil forces from Orion with the Space Confederation as our ally. Friends, it is Jesus that is coming through Orion, not evil forces. This is obviously part of Lucifer's plan to get the world to reject the coming of Jesus. Another movie preparing men's minds for the coming of the saucers is E.T. or Extraterrestrial. It is a story of a little space being that came down to this earth and was left behind. He made close friends with the little boy and in a time actually took possession of his soul. The movie was hilarious, and the little creature showed many aspects of a little child. He had to learn to talk. Everyone that met him fell in love with him. Eventually he died to save the little boy's life, who was growing sick because of him. The little boy, in tears, watched him raise himself to life. At the end of the film, all of his friends or disciples kissed him goodbye. Just before he ascended in the spacecraft, he put his finger on the Hindu third eye of the little boy and said, "I will be with you here." Another way that young people are being brought into the occult in the saucer movement is through the use of video games. You will have noticed that most video games revolve around fighting off foreign spacecraft that are invading this Earth. One of the many movies depicting our need of cooperation with space allies to fight off the evil forces about to invade us is that of The Last Starfighter. In this science fiction fantasy, a space war video game on Earth is in reality a test to determine who would qualify for interplanetary warfare. The young man in the story is kidnapped and taken into outer space to become a great space hero, saving the Earth and the Space Confederation from the enemy. So much of this saucer movement is tangible phenomenon that scientists and leading intellectual thinkers are being dragged kicking and screaming into Lucifer's deception. In '78, UFO Annual brought out the union between Catholicism, the charismatic movement, and the flying saucers. The last 3 decades has not only seen a tremendous revival of the occult and sightings of flying saucers, but also an epidemic of weeping Madonnas and bleeding statues in the Roman Catholic Church. Scientists have found these blood samples to be real blood. Among the miracles of the Protestant charismatic mania that took place in Wales in 1904 and 5 was seeing flying saucers. In 1917 in Fatima, Portugal, several children claimed to have seen Mary. The miracles that took place were seen by 70,000 people. These children said that Mary gave them a prophecy about the end of the world and a warfare between the communist world and the Christian world. Mary told the children to tell the audience that she would do a miracle on October 13, a miracle that was to astound the world and give evidence to these prophecies of a third world war. What was that miracle like, this Roman Catholic miracle done by Mary? Well, the darkened sky suddenly became illuminated. The cloud bank parted to reveal a great shiny silvery disk. Yes, it was a flying saucer. The cult of Mary, the blue army of Roman Catholicism, revolved around the flying saucer movement. In America, years later, when Officer Sherman was taken aboard a flying saucer, he drew a picture of what he saw on the chest of these saucer men. It was a crest, a winged serpent. The only winged serpents ever described in history are those to be found in the Bible, and it is a symbol of Satan or Lucifer. Those that are so determined that the coming of these fiery flying serpents or saucers are going to help us would be shocked by the information that is uncovered in Stan Deo's book, The Cosmic Conspiracy. A former U.S. intelligence agent now living in Australia has brought out the story that in the intelligence operations of the United States there is a close union with saucer intelligences working with high technological research. This is taking place largely in Australia at a place called Pine Gap. What are they studying there? This was discovered by a man named Bruce Cathay in harmonics. In his books on harmonics, he points out that around this world is an electromagnetic grid. The Earth is a great generator, as Nikola Tesla discovered. That they're working with electromagnetic propulsion and are planning a tremendous movement to bring the world into the snare of the New Age. These saucers will come as saviors to the world. Some tremendous force, some tremendous power is going to supposedly bring peace and safety to the Earth. This is brought out in the movie 2010 Space Odyssey. Here, Russian and American scientists investigating some very strange phenomenon taking place on Jupiter find there a very large geometric shape that cannot be understood. This geometric shape's activity on the planet's surface causes it to explode. The astronauts escape just in time, and across their computers comes a message. All the worlds are yours, except Europa. Attempt no landing there. Use them together in peace. Use them in peace. One thing that is brought out in the book and not in the movie is that geometric shape that caused the destruction of that planet and instituted peace on Earth was called Lucifer. It is known today in science that the human body is an electromagnetic organism, that everything in our body takes place because of electricity. The ancients believed that a man could harness and control electromagnetic energy by his mind. Many of the sciences today appear to support the occult sciences. But this does not mean that the occult philosophy is true. The same set of observable facts easily support both the philosophy of Christianity or the occult of the philosophy. Choosing to be a Christian, one chooses to submit his mind to the control of God. But in the occult, one chooses to believe that he is a God controlling himself. The occult teaches that we are on the verge of a great new frontier, a frontier in spiritual evolutionary advancement, where every man is a god and will be able to choose and control his own destiny. But what is it really saying? If the Christian philosophy is true, and Lucifer, that great angel who has now become the adversary, or Satan, is here to deceive mankind, that when we submit to self and withhold our mind from the control of the God of the Bible, we then come under Satan's power, thinking that we're controlling ourselves. The world will become like an India, men's minds submitted to a power they claim is within, but in reality the power of darkness. If you want to know what the New Age will be like, look to the degraded system of India. Look to the great empires of the past, when a few esoteric priests controlled the masses, teaching them a superstitious religion, while they themselves believed in the esoteric religion. David Spangler, one of the leaders in the New Movement, tells about the cosmic evolution. He says, when man enters upon the pathway of self, he enters into a great creative adventure of learning the meaning of divinity by accepting to himself the responsibility of a microcosm unto whom he is the God. There he can say, I have fully and absolutely accepted the responsibility of who and what I am. The being that helps man to reach this point is Lucifer, the angel of man's evolution, the spirit of light in the microcosmic world. This sounds self-fulfilling, but let's talk to some who have been there and come out.
Playing the voice to her, and she said, it sounded just like my grandmother. You know, that was my first really contact with a dead, spirit. But there was no fear in it. I wasn't afraid at all. The voice just was really pleasant. Well, I guess if it would be like an angel maybe. But there was no fear there. But that just really confirmed my belief in visiting the dead. And my friends used to mess around with the Ouija board, but I never would do that because of the fact that I knew if I had done it, it would work. And I didn't want nothing to do with Satan, at this time. And anyway, I started thinking, back in school we used to have this meditation class back in high school. And I thought, well, this is pretty good. I could meditate and develop my mind. I used to believe, basically I believed in God and what I thought was his 10 commandments, and I thought I was a good person. I treated others like I'd expect them to treat me. But I felt that if I could develop my mental capacities, that you'd be able to do all kinds of things. You'd be able to astral projection, that's where you can time travel more or less, or elevation, to elevate things, things of that sort. I thought that we all within us had this capabilities, but just that through the years we have lost, control of our minds. So I was working with meditation, trying to develop this control, this power, thinking that this was a God-given power, still not realizing where, all originated from. But as I worked with these things, I'd go out and ghost hunts and stuff like that, and finally it got to the point where I could think something. For instance, I'd be driving down the road, and if I wanted to honk my horn, I'd just think it, and it would honk, no problem. And that was just the beginning. But at night I'd go to bed, and it seems like I'd travel off to a distant land, like back to the Holy Lands in the Roman days. I could see what's going on, just like I lived back then, like a dual life. But I thought these things were really great, being able to use my supernatural abilities, develop them to do these types of things. And as it continued, this one evening, I went to bed, and I started going to like a trance or traveling in space, and I got scared. There was something different about it this time. Before I had control of these things, well, I thought it could, I thought I was in complete control, but this time I wasn't. There was something else, another power that was working within me this time, and I felt like my mind was being taken out of my body, just going through space, like if you were shooting through the galaxy, through stars, and my mind was being taken from me, and I couldn't stop it. I had no control at all, and the only thing I could say is, in the name of God, don't hurt me. I said that over and over again, and it stopped. I got out of it, and I just stopped all my meditation, everything at that time. But it wasn't until some months later that these things started to come back to me. It got to the point where instead of, I just didn't have no control. This power that was working from within, that was the evil power, I could feel its evilness, just had control. And at that time I knew God was my only way out. I started praying, and the more I prayed, the less problems I had with this. As I continued to pray and realize that there was power in prayer, there's just a relief that came over me, a peace. I started thinking there must be more than just saying these prayers and just going on with your life. And I started searching. I didn't want nothing to do with any churches because I was against organized Christianity. But I felt the need of Christ in my life. And I felt that as this power, it was taking control of me, which I thought was of God, and finally realized that it was. Because I couldn't fight it. I had no way to. It had control of me. I couldn't do nothing with it. And it was during the night times that these problems would arise. And if I'd stopped my praying, it would come back. The Lord answered my prayers. I started studying the Bible. My whole goal was just to get as much as the Word of God that I could. And it was at that time that I started realizing what God's Word was. All the problems I was having I learned about the state of the dead. All these things I believed in as a child, that I was taught as a child, I realized that it wasn't of God. It was just a false teaching. But as I read the Bible for myself, I realized, and the Lord answered all my questions about the state of the dead, about the supernatural, about life itself. And it was just from that time forward, it was just a continual growth. And now today I look back and I think how ignorant I was. Once you break away and even accepting Christ into your life, you have to stay away from those things.
When I was a youth of 18, I joined the Catholic institution looking for happiness, but it wasn't there. But my friends of the same church told me all these stories about things that would happen to them, departed souls, people from other worlds perhaps that would come and talk to them, and maybe even when they were praying. After a divorce and many years, my life turned to the spirit world, where I would go to seances. I met many people that were homosexuals, and they told me about these meetings. And I went there and I was drawn there. They would sing, they would pray, they would sit in circles in a very dark room, and a leader would lead out. We would see animals, sheep and goats. We would see people and figures moving about. And people would sometimes talk as if they were talking to someone. However, I never heard a voice. I was told that I had an aura, and that if I kept into this, that I could be very blessed and used by the spirits. I went on like this, and it seemed that my friends were into drugs, smoking marijuana, taking psilocybin, taking LSD, and different concoctions that they would make up. And one night, taking one of these drugs, peyote, I was flying. And no one can tell me, even today, with my mind straight, that my feet were not on the ground. I was flying. I began to think myself a witch. I decided to become a white witch, and I did so. I would have incantations. I had my own seances, and my friends and I would gather around, and things would happen. We would have answers. We would have objects moving. In all these years of trying to find happiness, I never found it. I was killing myself until I found Jesus Christ, the righteous one. Jesus Christ of the Bible. If you're in the occult, if you're into drugs, please try Jesus. He is the answer, and He is our happiness.
When I was 20 years old, I had heard a lot about the New Age movement from friends who were involved in it, so I thought I would see what was there for me. And so I went, for 17 years, I went from one seminar to another. I averaged 2 a month. They were usually weekend seminars. I did some that were a week long. I did this for 17 years and spent $10,000. I had fun during the seminars themselves, but they had no lasting effects and made no changes in my life. After doing this for 17 years, I had a benefactor come into my life, gave me everything I ever thought I wanted materially. And after 8 months of this, I asked the question, now what? You know, when you have everything that you ever thought you wanted, you know, the hole was still there. The emptiness was still there. One weekend I heard a voice tell me to go to church. I hadn't thought of church in 20 years. So I was up, dressed, and out of the house and on my way to church. It was the church I grew up in. Once I got there, I had the answers. I had the peace that I'd been looking for all those years. I had then everything that I'd been looking for.
For all my life, as far back as I can remember, even as a child, I had always been interested in the mysterious and the supernatural. This interest just consumed me. I made the best of every opportunity to learn more about the occult or anything related to it. I studied astral projection and white magic, black magic, and many other things. I was fascinated by them. They really seemed to have the potential for power that I could have to fulfill myself. But as I got into these activities, as I started practicing what I was learning, I found that I did not have that self-fulfillment and the peace that I was really looking for. There was excitement, there was power, but there was no real happiness. This went on for several years. I got deeper and deeper into these things. For every time that I was tempted to be disillusioned and give up and say, oh, this just doesn't have it anymore, I would see some new angle, some new aspect that I wanted to conquer, some new heights to rise to. And from those heights I thought there would be what I was looking for. But it was all in vain. After some years, I began to realize that this power, and it seemed to be the same force behind all these activities, when you get to the very bottom of it and get into it deeply, it all seemed to be the same power. I realized that this power, this force, was controlling me. And I did not know that until I tried to resist it and break free from it. When I decided I had enough, I wanted out. But I couldn't leave. It controlled me. It controlled my mind. And over a short period of time of resisting, I realized that it was controlling me to the point that I would go insane. I would lose my mind and lose my reasoning abilities unless something happened. Something to break me free. But where could I go? I didn't want God because God was a killjoy for all I could see. In every way he was a killjoy. And yet, where else could I go? There were two dead ends, either the powers that I was with or God. About this time, I had a couple of dreams. In one dream, I was instructed by this force that I was with on how to do such things like levitate objects and other items. And I was shown what appeared to be great joy and beauty in having that kind of power and how to perfect it. That little section of the dream closed, and then a new section of the dream opened. And like the voice of God himself, insofar as it's possible for us mortals to hear, I was told and shown what would be the end results of the people who practiced this power and who used it. And it was a horrible, mangling death. Some weeks or months later, I had another dream in which God, through Jesus Christ, explained to me that the time had come for me to make a decision, that I would continue on with the powers that I had been with, and I could never turn back, or I would choose God and choose what he had to offer, even though I didn't understand it. He explained to me that there was much I didn't understand about this Christian life that I despised, but that if I once would experience it, I would understand what the true joy and beauty was. But that he couldn't explain it to me until I actually took that step and decided to have that kind of a life. So after some struggle and realizing how desperate I was and the uselessness and the hopelessness of the situations I was in, I took that step. And through that determination and the help and the prayers of many other individuals who were concerned for me and realized something of what I was going through all of that, the power was broken that had been controlling me, and I was free of it. After making that decision and through the help of those who had prayed for me, after a time this power was broken. It was not without a struggle, for I realized that there was a supernatural war going on over me, and sometimes I felt it. This force that I had been with was not about to let me go, and so there were physical attacks and mental bombardments. But this new power, God, also worked, and again kept me from the attacks, saved me from the attacks of this first force, Satan. Now that that power has been broken and gone, and as I went through life and the experiences of what God had for me, I've learned more and more how loving God really is. For God has a peace, he gives us a peace that Satan cannot have. Lucifer can never even hope to begin to give us the fulfillment and satisfaction of living that God has given. If there was just a short way of summarizing everything up that I have gone through and summarizing what my experience has been, it would be that the life I now have, the power of God through Jesus Christ working in me, is one of joy and peace and great love and life. But what I had before this was unfulfillment, uncertainty, emptiness, and certain death.
In 1976, my wife and I were invited to go to Berkeley to work on a street ministry. We had come from a small Christian community, and the Berkeley atmosphere was quite a surprise to us. We learned a lot of things and had many interesting experiences. One of those experiences was that I made a close friend of a man who did astrology for a living. He came and visited us frequently, and one day he came to me and in private he said that he needed my help, that a power was trying to kill him. Well, I didn't know what he was talking about, but I would be willing to pray with him, so my wife and I and this gentleman went up into my office. And there a strange voice took possession of him and began to speak with us, telling us that we had no power, that we could do nothing to it. And then it began to strangle him, forcing him to the floor. My wife and I dropped to our knees, and when we just mentioned the name of Jesus, it just disappeared. I can even remember today the awesome feeling of the sense of power that a Christian has in just using the name of Jesus. And these powers of the occult world just simply melt away or disappear. That wasn't the only experience we've had. Since that time, many folks have come to us for help when they've been caught up and oppressed by these powers. And over again, it never ceases to amaze me that the name of Christ holds so much power for the Christian. One gentleman came to me, and after being introduced to him, he told me that he was a high priest in the world of spirit worship. Well, I was always interested in meeting someone like that, so I asked him to come in and sit down. We chatted for a little while, and then he explained to me that he had 109 spirit guides that gave him powers and abilities that helped him to remember and gave him talents. I didn't really know what to do because in the world I came from, we didn't want spirits around. So I asked him if he'd like to be rid of them, and I'd be happy to cast them out for him. In shock, he looked back at me. I remember him getting up and in fear walking out of the place. Why was he so afraid? I'll tell you that there has never been a contest, not even the slightest contest, in the strength between Jesus Christ and Lucifer, or Satan. The reason is the power of Jesus is as much stronger than the power of Lucifer as the power of a creator above a creature. What is the struggle, the competition, and the battle all about? The battle is over you, friend, and your heart. Who will you serve? Will you follow Jesus of Nazareth, the Son of God, the creator of the world, the author of the Bible? Or will you follow yourself into the great collage of the occult teachings? I know that I haven't even scratched the surface of those occult teachings and the size of this massive movement. There's no book that could ever contain it, let alone a 2-hour videotape. But I hope that I've been able to show you the Christian's perspective on this situation. And also I hope that I've raised a question in your mind about the validity of the New Age teachings, or the teachings of the occult, and their honesty. The occult teaches that every human being will become a god someday, that all paths lead to that eventual experience. But Christianity teaches that there is only one way to have eternal life, only one way to God, and that's through His Son, Jesus of Nazareth. Any other path, Christianity teaches, will lead to eternal death, eternal nothingness. I know that Jesus wants to invite us home today. He's done everything to try to convince us of how much He loves us. Our only hope is to accept His sacrifice in our behalf, and through His power live a life obedient to all God's commandments and be fitted for that wonderful new heaven, that new world that He's creating for us. Come and investigate Christianity and find the Jesus Christ of that religion. Study the Bible. I urge you today to begin a study of the Word of God, the Bible. Let's bow our heads together, shall we? Dear Father in heaven, I ask that you would bless this videotape. I know, Lord, that it has many flaws in it, but I just pray that folks will look at it and realize the importance today of studying their Bible and being ready for the soon return of Jesus Christ. I pray, Lord, that you'll urge upon the hearts of those who do not know Him yet to begin to search Him out and find Him in your Word, and to accept Him as their best friend and Savior. I pray that your Holy Spirit will go with this tape wherever it goes and use it to draw people into your love and prepare them for eternal life. These things I pray in Jesus' holy name. Amen.